Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp Olymp, and I'm here with a quick treat for you all. This is Assault Red Horizon 41. This is the expansion from it, and it's from Assault Games, obviously, by Mr. Wolfgang. Now, he was nice enough to send this to me, so putting that out front right now. Thing is Assault Red Horizon actually made my list for top 5 of last year. I really did enjoy this game. Tactical level skirmish game, had a lot of fun with it. It brought some new elements, so make sure you go check out my playthrough series. And this, I don't have enough time to set up a scenario. I got a whole bunch of stuff I'm trying to catch up with since I got out of the hospital, but I did want to at least show you guys what the expansion is adding to the game specifically. All right, so I got stuff laid out in front of you here. And the key thing with it is there's not a whole lot of actual physical components that it's going to be adding to the game. Rulebook that does come with a few scenarios there in the back, but there's not a whole lot of rules that are getting added to this, because the big thing that is coming in this game is the TAS and the OAS. So basically the tactical air support and the offboard artillery is what's getting added, okay? So you're gonna have a fairly substantial deck of cards that's going to have your artillery for both sides and then your airstrikes for both sides. Now I've grabbed out some examples that I will use to show you guys. There are also a couple of these player aids that get included as well. It is nice that they did include 2, so you don't have to share one if you don't want to. One side has all your offboard artillery stuff listed down on it. Other side is your tactical air support stuff. So what's going to happen with that? Now, I did grab out a few components of the main game just to show it to you, because I wanted you to make sure you saw this. Remember, this one has the custom dice with it, okay? Color-coded dice that have different levels of hits, basically a lot allocated to them depending on what color they are. So some dice are better than other dice. That's why you're going to see all these different colors. So when you're looking at these charts, you see all these colors on it. That's what they're in reference to, okay? Other thing I grabbed out an example of is some AA, just so I could use that when we start talking about our tactical air support here. Now, the original game did have cards that came with it, and they were used in a multitude of ways, but there were cards that were used not as like player unit identification cards, but to actually play during the game itself. So your hand of cards. That's where these cards are going to go. One of the key things I liked about Assault Red Horizon was the fact that there were unit formation cards. So when you were setting up your order of battle, you might have a couple of infantry formation cards and a tank formation card, or one of each, because there were infantry, artillery, and tanks, but they would have a variety of different units on those cards. Again, make sure you check out my original video series on it, explaining what all those cards are. But that's the key thing that I really did enjoy about this game. These cards are adding to that. So these are going to be ones that are going to be in your hand that you can play out. Now, key thing, and this is the way I played my scenario when I did an original playthrough of the game, is I played it with the special command point rules. In that, when you would go to activate a unit, you would allocate a command point to it. So when the Russian side and the German side were pre-turn, their planning phase, getting everything going, they would have X amount, say 5 command points that they would choose to spend between all different units that they had available that turn. These cards add another layer to that in the fact that you do have to spend a command point to play these cards. So you're not going to play it face up, so your opponent won't know, are you using artillery, or are you using tactical airstrike or anything like that. You're going to play it face down, but you will put one of those command tokens on it to signify the fact that you're activating that card this round. Now, depending on the card itself, they could be played in different time frames. These, for example, say support phase. So this would be done in the support phase, and so would this one, the artillery strike. Artillery is a little bit different. I'll touch on it more specifically here in just a sec. But looking at our strafing card, it'll designate what unit, so German or Russian, when, what. So these are BF-109E fighter bombers. Any special rules, like this one does gain an extra yellow defense die against heavy AA. And then the amount of dice and what dice they would be rolling if they have a second strike, which is this down over here, and then defensive rolls that they could get. So they get a green defensive roll. That's great, but in some circumstances they would get a yellow defensive roll added to that. Now, looking at our player aid, it walks us through nicely what's going to happen when you're conducting a tactical air sport, so when you got air coming in to blast the enemy. And this is where those blast markers come into play, because when I talked about this originally, those were symbols that just weren't being used yet because they were planned out for this expansion. So I like that. They were planning ahead. They didn't have this stuff put out yet, but that way when the expansion came, all of this was already actually in the game, ready to be added to it. So when we look at our new cards here with the strafing run, that blast symbol there correlates to this chart. So that will tell you, depending on certain things like range factors and then accuracy, what die the airstrike is going to be using for its attack and what will happen. And then any accuracy results that will also be rolled on, and potentially giving the unit, depending on their type, extra defensive die as well if the attack isn't as accurate or potentially is more accurate. And like I said, some do have the chance to do a second strike, right? So 2 attacks basically. And then that is what this is designating here, which will be applied when you're looking at the spotting. So it's accuracy. Actually, excuse me, that would be applied to this chart, not this chart. But then when it comes to the actual attacks, you're going to resolve them just like you would normally in the rulebook itself. So strafing run, that's how that's going to work. But don't forget that you do have, if you would focus in for me, you do have AA. So units that have this symbol here, like this flat cannon, can attack those tactical air supports. So if the Russians were to declare tactical air support strike, this unit could fire at them. You don't have to. You do get the chance to decide whether or not you want to. And if you have multiple AA units can attack the enemy aircraft as they're coming in. And then depending, again, what results they get, they can potentially shoot down the plane, they can damage it, or they might miss it completely. And depending on whether it's destroyed, the card will either be removed from the game or discarded or put back into the player's hand, depending on what results the AA anti-aircraft fire does get. And like I said, remember, you can fire with more than one unit, and it's up to the player. So if they've got multiple AA units, each one of those different AA units can fire in sequence against those tactical air supports. Now, when we start talking about our offboard artillery, there are multiple ways that they can be handled. They can use smoke, they can call in fire against vehicles, against infantry and artillery. Again, they can fire in more than one certain phase, like this one will fire in the support phase, but then during the action phase itself, they can fire again as a reaction, or even potentially they can skip their support phase to go for a direct fire action and only fire once, but have a more concentrated attack against the enemy units. Again, you're going to have things like accuracy charts that can change things, and then the blast values versus like buildings, because that is where our extra components here come in. Because I'm sure you've seen this sitting here, these little hexes, they will go on the maps, and they're there to replace certain things on the board if it gets cratered. So if it's just clear terrain or brushes and trees or even buildings, they can become ruined. So you can have cratered terrain form. You can have trees that start to get cratered. Was a swamp area, brush that gets cratered, or even ruined buildings. So now you have the ability to actually target buildings, and you can have circumstances where the building will collapse in on units that are actually inside the building, destroying the building and killing the units if you get a good roll on your artillery strike. So I really like this inclusion. Actually, this is probably my favorite inclusion in this expansion pack, is the ability to change the landscape, to change the map itself, depending on what type of artillery strike you have, what the results are on your rolls. Again, you see we've got our craters, ruins, terrain chart, the blast value versus buildings, all that cool stuff listed here on our player aid. But you can potentially change that terrain if you get some good rolls. You can crush the enemy troops who are trying to tuck away. Maybe your units can't get to them. Well, screw that. We'll just call in some artillery and we'll just take out the building too. So yeah, I really like that inclusion. And see, for me, this shows that the people behind this are actually paying attention. They're thinking ahead. They're not thinking about just the box that they're putting out right now. Because like I said, this card's from the core box. All of this over here, with the exception of the dice, this is the expansion content, but that symbol is related specifically to this expansion content. It has nothing to do with anything that's in the core box. So they were thinking ahead, like, okay, what do we got going on? Boom. We've got this planned out, so we're going to be prepared when our next expansion releases. So it's already built in on the cards. You don't have to have any new components, no new cards needed, no switching anything out. It's already right there in the base game. You can just, well, throw this stuff in and you're good to go. So you guys definitely stay tuned. I am going to be getting Assault Red Horizon to my table as soon as I possibly can. I am so unbelievably backed up since I got stuck in the hospital for a week, but cross our fingers. Hopefully I can get to it very soon, because I am looking forward to trying these new components out in the game. Because like I said, this was my favorite tactical game of last year, and this is only adding more cool stuff to what I already liked to begin with. But yeah, if you haven't checked it out already, Assault Red Horizon, really fun game. And if you want to add more content to it, you've already got into the game. If you want some tactical air support or off-board, I can never say that correct, off-board artillery added to the game with the ability to change the landscape, you just need a small low expansion to add that to the game. Nothing big. Actually, this all should fit right in the core box itself, since it is so large. But you guys stay tuned. I will be showing off some more of this game as soon as I get a chance to. All right, that's going to be it for me for this one. You guys take care. I will catch you in the next one.